To millions of basketball fans today, the name Bob Pettit might not ring the same bells as Michael Jordan or LeBron James. But to anyone who truly understands the history of the NBA, who respects the foundation on which this entire league was built, Bob Pettit is royalty. He was the first player to win the Most Valuable Player award, the first player to score 20,000 points, the man who ripped a championship away from the greatest dynasty in basketball history, with one of the most dominant performances the sport has ever seen. And here is the part that makes his story truly remarkable. He did all of this after being told repeatedly by everyone around him that he simply was not good enough. Bob Pettit was cut from his high school basketball team, not once, twice. The kid who would go on to become the greatest forward of his generation, the player who would rewrite the NBA record book and earn the respect of every single man who ever shared a court with him, could not even make the junior varsity squad at Baton Rouge High School in Louisiana. Robert E. Lee Pettit Jr. was born on December 12, 1932, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. His father was the county sheriff, a man of authority, discipline, and principle, and those qualities would prove to be absolutely critical to the younger Pettit's development. Because without his father's encouragement during those early years of failure and rejection, the basketball world might never have known the name Bob Pettit at all. As a freshman at Baton Rouge High School, Pettit was an awkward kid. 5'11", skinny, uncoordinated, the kind of teenager who trips over his own feet trying to run a layup drill. There were 17 candidates for the basketball team that year, and the coaches needed to cut 5 of them. Pettit was one of the 5 who did not make it. He came back the next year as a sophomore and tried again. Same result, cut from the team a second time. The coach, a man named Kenner Day, looked at this gangly kid and saw nothing worth keeping. For the rest of his life, Coach Day would be introduced at events as the man who cut Bob Pettit from his team. That became his legacy. Not whatever else he accomplished in his coaching career, just that. The guy who looked at a future Hall of Famer and said no thanks. But that second rejection could have been the end of the story. Most kids would have quit. Most teenagers, told for the second consecutive year that they were not talented enough, would have moved on to something else. Joined the debate team, focused on academics, found a sport where being tall and clumsy was less of a liability. Pettit did not quit, and the reason he did not quit was his father. The sheriff sat his son down and told him something that would change the trajectory of his entire life. He told him that talent was not the only thing that mattered, that hard work could compensate for a lack of natural ability, that if he wanted something badly enough and was willing to outwork everyone else trying to get it, he could achieve anything, and Bob Pettit believed him. He set up a basketball hoop in the backyard, and then he went to work. Not casual weekend shooting around with his buddies kind of work. Obsessive, relentless, sunrise to sunset, every single day, without exception kind of work. He fired shot after shot after shot at that backyard basket. He worked on his footwork, he worked on his coordination, he worked on his conditioning. He worked on every single aspect of his game with a single-minded intensity that bordered on mania. And something interesting started to happen. He started to grow. Between his sophomore and senior years, Pettit added 5 inches to his height. The clumsy 5'11" kid who could not make the junior varsity was suddenly a 6'4" young man with vastly improved coordination and a jump shot that had been forged through thousands of hours of solitary practice. By his junior year, he made the team. By his senior year, he was the best player on it. And he did not just lead Baton Rouge High School to a winning season, he led them to the Louisiana State Championship. The kid who was cut twice had become the best high school basketball player in the entire state. But Pettit was just getting started. He enrolled at Louisiana State University, right there in his hometown of Baton Rouge. And at LSU, the transformation accelerated. He kept growing. By the time he finished college, he stood 6'9" tall. The awkward teenager was gone, replaced by a long, athletic, supremely skilled big man who could do things on a basketball court that nobody his size had ever done before. You have to understand what basketball looked like in the early 1950s to appreciate what made Pettit so revolutionary. Big men in that era were lumbering, slow-footed players who planted themselves under the basket and waited for the ball to come to them. They scored on hook shots and tip-ins. They rebounded through sheer size. Agility was not part of the job description. Pettit shattered that mold completely. He was 6'9", but he moved like a guard. He could face up from 15 feet and hit a silky, smooth jump shot. He could put the ball on the floor and drive past slower defenders. He could run the floor on the fast break. He combined the size of a center with the skill set of a perimeter player. And nobody in college basketball had any idea how to guard him. During his sophomore season, he averaged 25.5 points per game and led the SEC in scoring. The following year, he averaged 24.9 points and 13.9 rebounds and carried LSU to their first SEC championship in nearly 2 decades. The Tigers made it all the way to the Final Four of the NCAA tournament that year, the deepest run in program history. Pettit was named a consensus All-American. His senior season was even more dominant. He averaged 31.4 points and 17.3 rebounds per game. Those are staggering numbers in any era. In the early 1950s, when the game was slower and possessions were fewer, they were almost incomprehensible. He won another SEC title, earned another All-American selection, and cemented his status as the best college basketball player in the country. LSU retired his number 50 jersey in 1954. He was only 21 years old, and he had already left a permanent mark on the program. But the real legacy was still ahead of him. The Milwaukee Hawks selected Bob Pettit with the 2nd overall pick in the 1954 NBA draft. And immediately, the doubters came crawling out of the woodwork. They said he is too thin. He only weighs 200 pounds. He will get pushed around by the bigger, stronger men in the professional game. He was great in college, sure, but the NBA is a different animal entirely. He does not have the body to survive an 80-game season against grown men who outweigh him by 30, 40, 50 pounds. Sound familiar? It should, because it was the exact same thing people had been saying about Pettit since he was a freshman in high school. Too small, too weak, not good enough. And every single time, he had proven them wrong through the sheer force of his work ethic and his refusal to accept the limitations other people tried to place on him. The NBA would be no different. Pettit signed with the Hawks for $11,000. At the time, it was the highest rookie contract in league history, and he earned every penny of it from the very first game. In his rookie season, 1954 to 1955, Pettit averaged 20.4 points per game and 13.8 rebounds per game. He was named the NBA Rookie of the Year. He was selected to the All-Star Game. He earned All-NBA first-team honors. In his very first year as a professional, the kid who was cut from his high school team was officially one of the best basketball players on the planet. And he was just warming up. The Hawks moved from Milwaukee to St. Louis before the 1955 to 1956 season. In that first year in their new city, Pettit announced himself as the most dominant player in the entire league. He led the NBA in scoring with 25.7 points per game. He led the league in rebounding. He was named to the All-Star team again, and this time he won the All-Star Game Most Valuable Player award. And then came the biggest honor of all, The NBA had decided to create a new award that season, a regular season Most Valuable Player trophy. Nobody had ever won it before. There was no precedent, no history, no previous winners to compare yourself to. Someone was going to be the first. Someone was going to set the standard for every Most Valuable Player winner who came after. That someone was Bob Pettit. He became the first most valuable player in the history of the National Basketball Association, the very first player to ever receive the award. Long before names like Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Oscar Robertson, Jerry West, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Michael Jordan, or LeBron James became legends, Bob Pettit was already making history. That alone would have been enough to secure his place in basketball history forever. But what made the story even more incredible was where he started. This was the same kid who had once been cut from his high school basketball team. At the time, nobody could have imagined he would grow into one of the greatest players the sport had ever seen. Pettit's 1955 to 1956 season completely changed the league. Night after night, he dominated games with his scoring, rebounding, and relentless energy. He was not flashy in the way later superstars would become known for, but he played with intensity every second he was on the floor. Defenders struggled to stop him because he never seemed to slow down. Fans quickly realized they were watching something special. By the end of the season, he had become the face of a growing league that was still trying to find its identity in American sports. Winning the first Most Valuable Player award was more than just a personal achievement. It showed that hard work, determination, and toughness could take a player further than anyone expected. Still, as amazing as that season was, it ended up feeling like only the beginning of something even bigger. The defining moment of Bob Pettit's career would arrive 2 years later in a game that basketball fans still talk about more than 60 years later. It was the kind of performance that becomes larger with time, the type of moment that turns a great player into a permanent legend. During the 1957 to 1958 season, Bob Pettit and the St. Louis Hawks rose into serious championship contenders. Standing in their way was the mighty Boston Celtics dynasty. To really understand how difficult that challenge was, you have to understand what the Celtics represented during that era. They were basically a super team before people even used that word. Their roster was filled with future Hall of Fame players. There was Bill Russell controlling the defense, Bob Cousy running the offense with incredible passing skills, Tom Heinsohn bringing toughness and scoring, Bill Sharman knocking down shots, Sam Jones delivering clutch performances, and Frank Ramsey providing depth off the bench. Almost every important player on that roster would eventually become a basketball legend. The Celtics had already won the championship the year before, and they were only getting stronger. Starting the very next season, they would win 8 straight NBA titles, building one of the most dominant dynasties in the history of professional sports. Beating them felt almost impossible. But Bob Pettit and the Hawks were ready to challenge basketball's greatest empire. And there is a beautiful irony embedded in how the Hawks built their roster to challenge Boston. When the Celtics acquired Bill Russell in the 1956 draft, they traded Ed McCauley and the rights to Cliff Hagan to St. Louis to make it happen. Those two players became key pieces alongside Pettit. The Celtics essentially armed their greatest rival with the ammunition needed to take them down. The Hawks and Celtics met in the 1958 NBA Finals. Boston had Bill Russell, but he was nursing a significant ankle injury. The series went the full 6 games, and it all came down to Game 6 in St. Louis on April 12, 1958. What Bob Pettit did in that game is the stuff of legend. He scored 50 points. 50 points in a championship-deciding game against the mighty Boston Celtics. At the time, that was a playoff scoring record, and even today it still sounds unbelievable. People throw around huge numbers in modern basketball all the time, but this was different. This was not a meaningless regular season game. This was not a player piling up points after the result had already been decided. Every basket mattered. Every possession carried pressure. The championship was on the line, and Bob Pettit delivered one of the greatest performances basketball had ever seen. What made it even more impressive was the opponent standing in front of him. The Celtics were not just another team. They were already becoming basketball's ultimate dynasty. They had future Hall of Fame players all over the court and a reputation for crushing opponents when the pressure became too much. Most teams folded against them. Most players cracked under that kind of intensity. Bob Pettit did the exact opposite. The bigger the moment became, the stronger he seemed to play. During the series, Bill Russell suffered an injury and tried to fight through it because that was the kind of competitor he was. Even hurt, Russell refused to sit out completely. But it was obvious he was limited, and Pettit recognized it immediately. He attacked without hesitation. He controlled the game with confidence and energy that the Celtics simply could not stop. Every time Boston tried to make a run and shift momentum back in their favor, Pettit answered with another huge basket. Every time the crowd felt the Celtics might take over, Pettit silenced them again. He attacked. He was everywhere on the floor, rebounding, scoring, fighting for loose balls, hitting difficult shots under pressure. It felt like the entire game was moving according to his will. His teammates supported him, but the night belonged completely to Bob Pettit. You could almost feel him refusing to lose, possession by possession. Then came the closing moments, the part of the game that turned an incredible performance into a legendary one. Pettit scored 19 of the Hawks' final 21 points. Think about how insane that really is. In the final stretch of a championship-clinching game, with the season hanging in the balance and the greatest team in basketball trying desperately to survive, one man completely took over. Not for a minute or two, not with lucky shots. He carried the offense almost entirely by himself when the pressure was at its absolute highest. That is the kind of performance athletes dream about, but almost never achieve. It was not just about talent. Plenty of players have talent. This was about fearlessness. Pettit looked across the floor at the most dominant team in basketball and refused to back down. He refused to let the moment overwhelm him. Instead, he owned it completely. When the final buzzer sounded, the St. Louis Hawks had defeated the Celtics, and Bob Pettit had delivered one of the greatest finals performances in basketball history. For one unforgettable night, the Celtics dynasty was stopped by a player who simply would not be denied. His jump shot with 15 seconds remaining sealed it. The Hawks won 110-109. The Boston Celtics dynasty had been interrupted for 1 year, and Bob Pettit had delivered the single greatest individual performance in NBA Finals history up to that point. Red Auerbach, the legendary Celtics coach, would needle Tom Heinsohn about that game for years afterward. He would say that they would have won 10 straight championships if Heinsohn had just held Pettit to 48 points instead of 50. It was a joke, but it contained a fundamental truth. Nobody could stop Bob Pettit when he decided that something was going to happen. The following season, 1958 to 1959, Pettit reached even greater individual heights. He led the league in scoring with 29.2 points per game, which set an NBA record at the time. He finished second in the league in rebounding, behind only Bill Russell. He won his second Most Valuable Player award. He remains to this day the only player in the history of the Hawks franchise to win the regular season Most Valuable Player award. Not Dominique Wilkins, not Trae Young. Nobody else, just Bob Pettit. The Hawks returned to the finals in 1960 and 1961. But both times they fell to the Celtics. Russell was healthy now, and Boston's dynasty was in full swing. Pettit gave everything he had, but some forces of nature are simply too powerful to overcome alone. He needed more help than his supporting cast could provide. But even in defeat, Pettit continued to produce numbers that defy logic. The 1960 to 1961 season might be his most statistically impressive. He averaged 27.9 points per game and 20.3 rebounds per game. In the entire history of the NBA, only 5 players have ever averaged more than 20 rebounds in a season. Of those 5, only 3, Pettit, Wilt Chamberlain, and Jerry Lucas, managed to average more than 20 points and 20 rebounds in the same season. That is elite company on a level that most people cannot even comprehend. On February 18, 1961, Pettit scored a career-high 57 points and grabbed 28 rebounds in a single game against the Detroit Pistons. The Hawks won 141-138. That stat line looks like a typo: 57 points and 28 rebounds from one man in one game. The following season, 1961-1962, Bob Pettit reached the highest scoring average of his entire career. He averaged 31.1 points per game, a number that showed he was still one of the most unstoppable players in basketball. What made it even more impressive was his age. Pettit was already 30 years old, an age when many players during that era were beginning to slow down. Instead, he was playing some of the best basketball of his life. By that point, Pettit had already spent years battling against the toughest teams and strongest players in the National Basketball Association. He never played the game in a relaxed or careful way. Every night, he attacked basketball with pure intensity. He crashed into defenders for rebounds, dove for loose balls, fought for position under the basket, and pushed himself harder than almost anyone else on the court. That non-stop effort was one of the biggest reasons he became a superstar, but it also came with a cost. The game was beginning to wear his body down. The punishment from years of physical play slowly started catching up to him. Back then, sports medicine was nowhere near as advanced as it is today. Players often played through pain because they had no other choice. Pettit was exactly that kind of competitor. Even when his body was hurting, he still played with the same determination that had defined his entire career. By the time the 1964 to 1965 season arrived, the injuries had become impossible to ignore. Pettit missed 30 games that year, more than he had ever missed in any previous season. For many players, that would have been the clear sign that their career was nearing the end. But even in a weakened state, Pettit remained incredibly productive. Despite dealing with injuries and missing a large part of the season, he still averaged more than 20 points per game. That says everything you need to know about Bob Pettit as a player. Even when his body was breaking down, he still performed at an elite level. He simply did not know how to play basketball any other way. There was no version of Pettit that coasted through games or settled for average performances. Every time he stepped onto the court, he competed with everything he had. In 1965, at only 32 years old, Pettit decided to retire from professional basketball. It may seem young by modern standards, but the years of physical punishment had taken a massive toll on him. Still, the career he left behind was extraordinary. Over 792 career games, Pettit scored 20,880 points. That gave him a career scoring average of 26.4 points per game, an incredible number that placed him among the greatest scorers basketball had ever seen. He also grabbed 12,849 rebounds, averaging 16.2 rebounds per game for his career. Those numbers are almost difficult to imagine today, especially considering the level of competition he faced every night. When Pettit retired, his point total was the highest in NBA history. Nobody had ever scored more points than him at that time. His rebound total ranked second only to Bill Russell, one of the greatest rebounders and defenders the sport has ever known. Bob Pettit may not always get mentioned as often as some later basketball icons, but his impact on the game was enormous. He helped shape what greatness in basketball looked like, and he built his legacy through toughness, consistency, and an unstoppable desire to compete. His 16.2 rebounds per game career average still ranks third all-time, behind only Chamberlain and Russell. And unlike those two, Pettit was not a true center. He was a 6'9" forward, pulling down boards at a rate that no player at his position has come close to matching before or since. Nearly 30% of his career points came from the free throw line. He shot 6,182 free throws over 11 seasons, a testament to his relentless aggression and his ability to draw contact even when every defender in the building knew he was coming. He was an all-star in all 11 of his NBA seasons. Every single one. He was named to the All-NBA First Team 10 times and the All-NBA Second Team once in his final injury-shortened season. He won the All-Star Game Most Valuable Player Award 4 times in 1956, 1958, 1959, and 1962. Only Kobe Bryant has matched that total. He still holds the records for the top 2 rebounding performances in All-Star Game history, with 26 in 1958 and 27 in 1962. He never finished below 7th in the NBA scoring race in any season of his career. And here is a statistic that might be the most telling of all. Bob Pettit averaged at least 20 points per game and at least 12 rebounds per game in every single one of his 11 NBA seasons. Every one. No off years, no decline phase, no seasons where he coasted or took it easy. From the moment he entered the league to the moment he left it, he was one of the best players alive. No other retired player in NBA history who played more than 2 seasons has averaged over 20 points per game in every season of their career. Michael Jordan came close, but he averaged exactly 20.0 in his final season with the Wizards, which technically ties but does not exceed the mark. Pettit stands alone, and what makes all of this even more impressive is the context. Pettit played in an era before sports science, before personal trainers and nutritionists and recovery protocols and charter flights. He played in an era when players rode buses between cities, slept in cheap hotels, and played back-to-back games on consecutive nights with no rest days in between. The physical toll was enormous, and the support systems that modern players take for granted simply did not exist. Pettit survived and thrived in that environment through nothing but willpower and work ethic. The same qualities that had carried him from the humiliation of being cut from his high school team to the pinnacle of professional basketball. Bill Russell, Pettit's greatest rival and one of the most respected voices in the history of the sport, offered a tribute that captures the essence of who Bob Pettit was as a player. He said that Pettit made second effort a part of the sport's vocabulary, that he kept coming at you more than any man in the game, that he was always battling for position, always fighting you off the boards. You could knock him down and he would get back up. You could box him out and he would find a way around you. You could deny him the ball and he would get it anyway. Because Bob Pettit simply refused to be stopped. That was his superpower. Not speed, not athleticism, not God-given physical gifts that no one else possessed. His superpower was that he worked harder and wanted it more than anyone else on the floor. Every single night, for 11 straight years. Without exception, in 1970, 5 years after his retirement, Bob Pettit was inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. It was a formality. Everyone knew he belonged. The only question was how quickly they could get him in. In 1996, when the NBA celebrated its 50th anniversary by naming the 50 greatest players in league history, Pettit was on the list. Of course he was. In 2021, when the league expanded the honor to the 75th greatest players for its 75th anniversary, Pettit was on that list too. He is one of only 4 players in NBA history to be named to all 4 anniversary teams, the 25th, 35th, 50th, and 75th. The other 3 are Bob Cousy, George Mikan, and Bill Russell. That is the company he keeps. The absolute founding fathers of professional basketball. After basketball, Pettit built a second career in the financial world. He worked in banking in Baton Rouge and Metairie, Louisiana for 23 years. Then in 1988, he transitioned into financial consulting. He co-founded a company called Equitas Capital Investors and worked there until his retirement in 2006. The transition from professional athlete to successful businessman was seamless for Pettit. And that should not surprise anyone who knew him. The same qualities that made him a great basketball player, the discipline, the work ethic. The refusal to accept failure translated directly into the corporate world. He approached finance the same way he approached free throw shooting, with relentless dedication and an obsessive attention to detail. The Atlanta Hawks, the franchise that began as the Milwaukee Hawks and then became the St. Louis Hawks before moving to Atlanta in 1968, retired Pettit's number 9 jersey. It was the first number the franchise ever retired. When the Hawks looked back at their history, at every player who had ever worn the uniform, the first name that came to mind was always Bob Pettit. His legacy extends far beyond statistics and awards, as impressive as those are. Bob Pettit fundamentally changed how the game of basketball was played. Before him, big men were stationary. After him, they were expected to be versatile. Before him, forwards stood in the post and waited. After him, they faced up, drove, shot from the perimeter, and ran the floor. He was the prototype for the modern power forward, the template that every skilled big man who came after him was built upon. Kevin McHale, Karl Malone, Tim Duncan, Dirk Nowitzki, Kevin Garnett, Giannis Antetokounmpo. All of them owe a debt to Bob Pettit. He proved that a tall player could also be skilled. He proved that size and agility were not mutually exclusive. He opened a door that generations of players have been walking through ever since. And perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Pettit's entire career is the consistency. There are no down chapters in his story, no periods where he struggled or lost his way or failed to live up to expectations. From the moment he entered the NBA to the moment he left, he was elite, relentlessly, stubbornly, unwaveringly elite. The only thing that finally stopped him was his own body breaking down from the cumulative wear of 11 seasons of playing at maximum intensity every single night. There is a tendency in modern sports culture to forget the pioneers, to assume that the players of today are so much more skilled and athletic than the players of the past that historical comparisons are meaningless. That is a mistake, because while the game has evolved, the qualities that make a player truly great have not changed one bit. The willingness to work, the refusal to accept defeat, the ability to rise to the biggest moments, the determination to prove the doubters wrong. Bob Pettit had all of those qualities in abundance, more than almost anyone who has ever played the game. He was told he was too clumsy to make his high school team. He became an All-American. He was told he was too thin to survive in the NBA. He became the league ace and most valuable player. He was told the Celtics were unbeatable. He beat them in the most dramatic fashion imaginable, scoring 50 points in a championship clincher that is still talked about more than 6 decades later. Every time someone told Bob Pettit he could not do something, he went out and did it. Not with flash, not with trash talk, not with social media campaigns or shoe deals or primetime television specials, just with work. Quiet, relentless, unceasing work, day after day, year after year, until the doubters had nothing left to say. He was born on December 12, 1932, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, cut from his high school team twice, All-American at LSU, number 2 overall pick, Rookie of the Year, 2-time Most Valuable Player, NBA Champion, 11-time All-Star, 4-time All-Star Game, Most Valuable Player, first player in history to score 20,000 points, Hall of Famer, member of every NBA anniversary team ever assembled. And every single bit of it started with a skinny kid in a backyard, shooting at a basket until his arms ached, refusing to believe that the people who told him he was not good enough were right, refusing to accept the word no as a final answer, refusing to let someone else's opinion define the limits of what he could achieve. That is the story of Bob Pettit, the greatest forward of his era, one of the greatest players who ever lived, and proof that talent without work is nothing, but work without talent can become something extraordinary. Like and subscribe for more basketball history content. Until next time.